the general, trusty vassal drummer!" cried Nutcracker very loudly, and immediately the drummer began to roll his drum in the most splendid style, so that the windows of the glass cupboard rattled and resounded. Then there began a cracking and a clattering inside, and Marie saw all the lids of the boxes in which Fritz's army was quartered bursting open. The soldiers all came out and jumped down to the bottom shelf, where they formed up in good order. Nutcracker hurried up and down the ranks, speaking words of encouragement. "There's not a dog of a trumpeter taken the trouble to sound a call," he cried in a fury. Then he turned to the pantaloon, who was looking decidedly pale, and wobbling his long chin a good deal, said in a solemn tone, "I know how brave and experienced you are, General. What is essential here is a rapid comprehension of the situation and immediate utilization of the passing moment. I entrust you with the command of the cavalry and artillery. You can do without a horse. Your own legs are long, and you can gallop on them as fast as is necessary. Do your duty." Immediately Pantaloon put his long, lean fingers to his mouth and gave such a piercing crow that it rang as if 100 little trumpets had been sounding lustily. Then there began a tramping and a neighing in the cupboard, and Fritz's dragoons and cuirassiers, but above all the new glittering hussars, marched out, and then came to a halt, drawn up on the floor. They then marched past Nutcracker by regiments, with guidon flying and bands playing, and after this they wheeled into line and formed up at right angles to the line of march. Upon this, Fritz's artillery came rattling up and formed action front in advance of the halted cavalry. Then it went boom, boom, and Marie saw the sugar plums doing terrible execution amongst the thickly massed mouse battalions, which were powdered quite white by them and greatly put to shame. But a battery of heavy guns, which had taken up a strong position on Mamma's footstool, was what did the greatest execution, and boom, 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 kept up a murderous fire of gingerbread nuts into the enemy's ranks, with most destructive effect, mowing the mice down in great numbers. The enemy, however, was not materially checked in this advance, and had even possessed himself of one or two of the heavy guns, when there came and Marie could scarcely see what was happening for smoke and dust. But this much is certain, that every corps engaged fought with the utmost bravery and determination, and it was for a long time doubtful which side would gain the day. The mice kept on developing fresh bodies of their forces as they were advanced to the scene of action. The little silver bells and balls like pills in size, which they delivered with great precision, their musketry practice being especially fine, took effect even inside the glass cupboard. Clara and Gertrude ran up and down in utter despair, wringing their hands and loudly lamenting, "Oh, must I? Oh, the very loveliest doll in the world perish miserably in the very flower of my youth," cried Miss Clara. "Oh, was it for this," wept Gertrude, "that I have taken such pains to conserve myself all these years? Oh, must I be shot here in my own drawing-room after all?" On this, they fell into each other's arms and howled so terribly that you could hear them above all the din of the battle. for you have no idea of the hurly-burly that went on now, dear auditor. It went all confusedly and higgledy-piggledy. And the Mouse King and the mice squeaked and screamed, and then again Nutcracker's powerful voice was heard shouting words of command and issuing important orders, and he was seen striding along amongst his battalions in the thick of the fire. Pantaloon had made several most brilliant cavalry charges and covered himself with glory. But Fritz's hussars were subjected by the mice to a heavy fire of very evil-smelling shot, which made horror spots on their red tunics. Oh, this caused them to hesitate and hang rather back for a time. Pantaloon made them take ground to the left in echelon, and in the excitement of the moment, he, with his dragoons and cuirassiers, executed a somewhat analogous movement. That is to say, they brought up the right shoulder, wheeled to the left, and marched home to their quarters. This had the effect of bringing the battery of artillery on the footstool into imminent danger, and it was not long before a large body of excruciatingly ugly mice delivered such a vigorous assault on this position that the whole of the footstool with the guns and gunners fell into the enemy's hands. Nutcracker seemed much disconcerted, ordered his right wing to commence a retrograde movement. A soldier of your experience, my dear Fritz, knows well that such a movement is almost tantamount to a regular retreat, and you grieve with me in anticipation for the disaster which threatens the army of Marie's beloved little Nutcracker. But turn your glance in the other direction and look at this left wing of Nutcrackers, where all is still going well, and you will see that there's still much hope for the commander-in-chief and his cause. During the hardest part of the engagement, masses of mouse cavalry had been quietly debouching from under the chest of drawers, and had subsequently made a most determined advance upon the left wing of Nutcracker's force, uttering loud and horrible squeakings. But what a reception they met with! Very slowly, as the nature of the terrain necessitated, for the ledge at the bottom of the cupboard had to be passed. The regiment of motto figures, commanded by 2 Chinese emperors, advanced and formed a square. These fine, brilliantly uniformed troops, consisting of gardeners, Tyrolese, Tunguses, hairdressers, harlequins, cupids, lions, tigers, unicorns, and monkeys, fought with the utmost courage, coolness, and steady endurance. This battalion d'élite would have wrested the victory from the enemy had not one of the mouse cavalry captains, pushing forward in a rush and a rash, foolhardy manner, made a charge upon one of the Chinese emperors and bitten off his head. The Chinese emperor, in his fall, knocked over and smothered a couple of Tunguses and a unicorn, and this created a gap through which the enemy effected a rush, which resulted in the whole battalion being bitten to death. But the enemy gained little advantage by this, for as soon as one of the mouse cavalry soldiers bit one of those brave adversaries to death, he found that there was a small piece of printed paper sticking in his throat, of which he died in a moment. Still, this was of small advantage to Nutcracker's army, which, having once commenced a retrograde movement, went on retreating farther and farther, suffering greater and greater loss. The unfortunate Nutcracker soon found himself driven back close to the front of the cupboard with a very small remnant of his army. "Bring up the reserves, Pantaloon, Scaramouche, Drummer! What the devil have you got to?" shouted Nutcracker, who was still reckoning on reinforcements from the cupboard. And there did, in fact, advance a small contingent of brown gingerbread men and women with gilt faces, hats, and helmets. But they laid about them so clumsily that they never hit any of the enemy, and soon knocked off the cap of their commander-in-chief, Nutcracker himself. And the enemy's chasseurs soon bit their legs off, so that they toppled and tumbled topsy-turvy and killed several of Nutcracker's companions in arms into the bargain. Oh, Nutcracker was now hard-pressed and closely hemmed in by the enemy, and in a position of extreme peril. He tried to jump the bottom ledge of the cupboard, but his legs were not long enough. Claire and Gertrude had fainted, so they could give him no assistance. Hussars and heavy dragoons came charging up at him, and he shouted in a wild despair, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" At this moment, the two of the enemy's riflemen seized him by his wooden cloak, and the king of the mice went rushing up to him, squeaking in triumph out of all his 7 throats. Marie could contain herself no longer. Oh, my poor Nutcracker! Oh, she sobbed, took her left shoe off without very distinctly knowing what she was about, and threw it as hard as she could into the thick of the enemy, straight at their king. Instantly, everything vanished, disappeared. All was silence. Nothing was to be seen, but Marie felt a more stinging pain than before in her left arm, and fell on the floor, insensible.